Good afternoon and a very warm welcome indeed to this afternoon's iOB business webinar. It's a pleasure to have you on here as always. For those new faces that are joining us, it's a real pleasure to meet you for the first time. For those of you that we see on a regular basis, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us again today. Now, on today's iOB business webinar, we're going to be talking about how to plan and not to overthink. Okay, overthinking can be such an awful thing sometimes in business, and sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's presentation. Okay, so for those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Ben and I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business. Now, if you are not familiar with how these webinars run, what we do is we do a brief introduction with myself just now, and then we're going to dive into a presentation. Now, the presentation will contain 3 topics, and it's going to run for around about 15 to 20 minutes or so. Now, it's important to note that if you do have any questions at any point throughout the presentation, you're more than welcome to go ahead and ask them. They can be about business, they can be about marketing, they can be about the presentation itself. Okay, so there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen there, and it should be in a kind of grayish box. If you go ahead, pop your question in there and we will get to them in the Q&A session at the end. Okay, so what we're going to do as well is we're going to take a brief pause between each topic just to make sure that you have enough time to take down any notes that you'd like to take. So go ahead and grab a notepad and indeed ask any questions that you might have for us today. So whilst we're just giving everybody a couple of minutes to get on and join us here today, you should be able to see today's presentation on screen now. Okay, so what I'd like to do just before we go ahead and get started, whilst we're giving everybody a second to join, if you would be so kind as to let me know, you won't be able to see me anymore, but if you could please let me know that you can see the screen okay and that you can indeed hear my voice okay, that would be excellent. And then we can go ahead and get started with today's presentation. All right, cool. Okay, audio good, visual good. A few more people joining us now, so welcome. Absolute pleasure to have you here as always. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin with today's session. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how to plan and not how to overthink. Okay, so your presenter today is myself. My name is Ben and I'm a professional business coach. Okay, so this is what I get to do every single day. It's my passion, it's my love. And it's an absolute pleasure to be on here speaking with you about business and digital marketing today. Okay, so today we're going to cover 3 main topics as always. Number 1, we're going to discuss willingness to take calculated risk. Okay, this is a big one in business. If you're not willing to take calculated risk, you will not see yourself excel as well as you could. Number 2, we're going to discuss avoiding procrastination. Now, myself included, everybody has felt this at some point in time, whether it be personal or business. Okay, and we're going to talk about overcoming procrastination. And finally, we're going to discuss carefully choosing your advisory sources, okay? Because as a business coach, as I'm sure you'll understand, I get this question an awful lot. You know, where should I listen? What should I look at? What sort of advice should I take on board? Okay, so this is something that we're going to cover for you as well throughout today's session. Okay, so beginning with topic number 1, willingness to take calculated risk. Okay, now calculated being the key and operative word here. Okay, so most business decisions will involve an element of risk. It's important that you understand this, whether you're a veteran of the industry, whether you're experienced digital marketing, or whether you're just coming into the industry now as a new marketing agency owner, or whether in fact you are thinking about becoming a digital agency owner. Okay, it's important that we understand collectively as business owners that most business decisions will involve an element of risk. Now, risk can mean multiple things. It can be financial, it can be operational, it can be sometimes taking a shot at something that you're not sure if it's going to work out or not, okay? The important thing to do is make sure that the risk primarily is worth taking, okay? What is the reward? So I'm sure you've heard the phrase before as well, risk versus reward, or risk and reward, or whatever terminology you've heard it with, you'll have heard a phrase along these lines, okay? Now, when we're discussing the fact that business decisions involve an element of risk, I'm not saying go out and risk everything with your business, but what I am saying is that if you want to grow, if you want to excel, we have to make new decisions. And when we make these new decisions, there's almost always going to be an element of risk involved, okay? So this doesn't mean that you can't conduct thorough analysis, okay? So your key information before any major decision, especially those that involve a risk, okay, is to make sure that you have thoroughly done your background research, you've done your analysis, you've ran the numbers, you've made sure that, okay, well, if everything goes to plan, then this is what we should achieve, okay? Now, discussing risk, okay, nothing in business is a guarantee, okay, absolutely nothing. Everything can happen in a certain way, and ideally we want things to happen the way we would like them to happen. Now, if they don't, it's not always a disaster, and when they do, it's an excellent thing. Okay, so some of your decisions will pay off, others won't pay off. Now, there's a phrase that I love, and I'm afraid I can't remember who said it first, but it was, it's only a mistake if you don't learn from it. Okay, so I'm sure I've said that before. It's a very, very famous person who said it. And I wish I could tell you who said it first, but I'm sure if you have a little Google, you'll be able to find out. Okay, but I love that phrase. It's only a mistake if you don't learn from it. Okay, and that is incredibly true. If you repeat the same mistake twice, then it becomes a mistake. If you repeat a mistake, if you commit a mistake once, it is a learning curve. It's a lesson. Okay. However, when you are making any decision when it comes to your business, if you have conducted thorough analysis, if you have read the information, if you have done your research, you will absolutely make sure that you are making the best possible decision going forward, and therefore reduce the ultimate risk. Okay. So you can also mitigate your risk and forward plan with solid exit strategies. Okay. So if you're unfamiliar with the term exit strategy, this is essentially, to put it in simple terms, your way out of something. Okay. So let's just say, for example's sake, that you're a growing digital agency and you're looking at taking on an office. Okay. Now, a good exit strategy here, or in other terms, a way to mitigate your risk, okay? Because as always, a big business decision like this is going to be a risk of some kind, okay? It's going to be an additional overhead. It may mean moving geographical location. It could mean lots of things, okay? Now, what you want to do is, first of all, do your research and analysis and make sure that this is the right office for you, that it's affordable, that your cash flow can support it, and all these other things that you should keep an eye on, okay? What you must also do to mitigate the risk is make sure that you have a strong exit strategy. Okay, now that comes down to the particulars. Okay, we have to be specific, we have to be thorough. Now, let's just say that that a riskier risk would be taking on an office with, let's say, a 24-month commitment at a price that you can afford now, but might not be able to afford in the future. So let's just say that it's £1,000 over 24 months. Okay. Now, that's a £24,000 commitment to the business, and you don't know what could happen over the next 2 years. Whilst you always plan for the best, you strive for the best, you work for the best, you can't ever be sure that your business is going to achieve X, Y, Z. You can plan for it, you can calculate it, you can do all the right things, and often it does pay off. But you also need to make sure that you're protecting your bottom line. Okay, now this is one of the biggest things about business, is that whilst we want to grow, we also must preserve and protect what we currently have. Okay, so you can mitigate your risk and forward plan with solid exit strategies. Okay, so option number one with an office, 24 months at £1,000 per month. Fine. Okay, but it's a locked in contract and you're legally obligated to pay it. Now, this would be considered an unnecessarily risky decision, primarily because you're committing to £24,000. Now, maybe you have that in cash reserves, maybe you don't. If you do, it's less risky. If you don't, it's even more risky. Okay. Now, a secondary option with a good exit strategy would be more beneficial. Okay. So let's look at it this way instead. Let's say hypothetically that we're looking to take on an office. Now, that office is still £1,000 per month. And what they require from us is a 1 month deposit. Okay, that's fine. So we can put £1,000 down if the business can afford to do so. However, we're making sure that in the fine print, the paperwork, if you were, on the office lease or office agreement, allows us to break the contract, or it's called an exit clause or a break clause, 3 months into the agreement. Okay, so our overall financial commitment is 1 month deposit plus 3 months of payments, right? So that would total £4,000 versus the counterpart of £24,000. So now it's a £4,000 risk as opposed to a £24,000 risk. Okay, so you can look at doing things like short-term release clauses, break clauses, exit clauses. You could also look at monthly rolling contracts where you're not committing to the long term, and so long as you can afford the office that month, you'll pay for the office that month, and so forth. Now, that's one example of an exit strategy. Okay, so when we're talking about mitigating your risk and forward planning, this is an absolute prime example of just one thing that you can do to make sure that you're not taking on unnecessary risk. Okay, now this is something as simple as having a closer look at the paperwork and negotiating with the landlord of the office. Okay, very, very simple. So, final piece of information for you on topic number one today. Okay, you must allow yourself to take a leap from time to time. Okay. So long as you have done your homework, this is how we grow. So we can't always play it safe in business. We can't always stay in the comfort zone. Okay. As much as we would love to, we cannot grow this way. In order to grow, you must do something that you haven't done before. Okay. Now, almost always, this is going to include an element of risk. But what can you do? You can mitigate the risk. You can do thorough analysis, and you can develop yourself with a strong exit strategy. Guess what? If it doesn't work, that's fine. Back out of it. Okay. You need to allow yourself the option to trial with something, experiment with something, not fully committing to it. Okay. So there's another phrase that I love, and it's test the water with 1 foot. Don't jump in with 2 feet at one time. Okay. Now, I believe that was Warren Buffett that said that. Okay. A very, very, very successful person who has went his entire life taking calculated risks to get to where he has today. Okay. So you must allow yourself to take a leap from time to time, so long as you've done your homework. Okay. If you want to grow, this is how you will grow. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that information on screen for you for just a second there, and you go ahead and take down any notes, and please do ask any questions that you have for me on today's presentation, and I'll be right back with you. All right, perfect. So hopefully you've had a chance now to jot down any notes that you have for us, and we can move on to topic number 2. Okay, so one of my personal favorites, avoiding procrastination. Okay, so it's a slightly briefer topic than the other ones, but just as important. Okay, so number 1, too much time thinking about the same decision can foster doubt within ourselves. Now, this is an interesting tidbit. It's an interesting piece of advice that I received once, and it's so, so true. Okay, too much time thinking about the same decision can foster doubt within ourselves. Why? Because this is your classic theory of overthinking. All right. The more you think about something, the more you can begin to foster doubt. You can start to lose self-belief. You can start to believe that it's the wrong decision. You can think of things that you never would have thought of, that never would have been relevant if you didn't spend so much time thinking about it. Okay. Now, let me make clear, this is not the same as diving in with 2 feet. Okay. What I'm saying here is that too much time thinking about the same decision can foster doubt within ourselves. Why? Because we can create hypothetical scenarios that will not and should not exist. Okay. We could think about this financially. We could think about this operationally. We could use the office example again. Okay. If you know deeply that getting an office is the right move for your business because you have a growing team, because you need the space, maybe you're working from home and you could do with getting a separate space to work from for productivity, focus, all these wonderful things. You could think long enough about it. And you could think, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get on with the landlord, or what if it gets drafty in the winter, or what if the heating isn't up to scratch, or any number of things that would not be relevant, okay, but could begin to foster doubt within ourselves. So there's that classic theory that overthinking can really stop you from being productive, and it can really stop you from making key, crucial decisions going forward. Okay, now there's another theory that if we risk certain things or we project ourselves onto a new level, then we're almost forced to keep up with that new level. Okay, so let's say that you jump your business up a notch. You're now working harder, you're working faster, you're working slightly longer to keep up with this newfound demand that you never would have done if you hadn't have taken that jump, you hadn't have taken that risk. Okay, so jumping up a level forces you to keep up with that level in a great and positive way. If you do not take that jump to the next level, then why would you push yourself harder? Why would you push yourself further? Okay, so there's a very, very popular theory, financially and in business and in personal lives, that if we take a risk, we make a commitment, and then we have to meet that commitment. So we will work harder, we will become smarter, we will become faster to make sure that we meet those newfound requirements that we expect of ourselves. Okay, if we don't push ourselves out with the comfort zone, then that means that we will never truly grow. Okay, so your office again is the perfect example here. You take on a new overhead, you have to meet that financial amount every single month without fail. Otherwise, you lose your office. Okay, so whilst we discussed that you can have strong exit strategies and you can pull out of the office agreement if you needed to, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'd want to. Okay, so you would be then required to push yourself and make sure that you kept achieving that financial number to continually afford your office. Okay, so often when we find that there has been a sensible decision made, it's best to act on this decision sooner rather than later. Okay, now sensible being the key word here. I'm not telling you to go and buy a Lambo tomorrow and then make yourself afford the payments. I'm not saying go and buy a 10-bedroom mansion beach house. Okay, all I'm saying is when a sensible decision is made, It's best to act on this decision sooner rather than later. Okay. Procrastination is the killer here. If we wait too long, the excitement, the idea, it begins to fade. So maybe you had a wonderful idea about your business, last night, and you want to action it immediately. Okay. So get to it this morning. As soon as you have time, let's get working on it. Okay. Let's work on it this afternoon. Let's work on it tomorrow. Now, let's just say in a similar scenario, you have the idea last night, but you wait a month to action it. By this point, the idea is probably faded. You would struggle to remember necessarily why you thought it was a good idea in the first place. You're now doubting yourself because you've overthought it a little bit. And you're not so sure if you're capable of doing it anymore. Okay. But if you strike whilst the iron is hot, okay, you make sure that you have done your research, you have taken any appropriate action you need to take, you have driven the idea forwards, you will feel motivated, you will feel strong. Okay. Now, this is why when a sensible decision is made, it's best to action it sooner rather than later. Okay, this is simple business theory. Now, final piece of advice I have for you on avoiding procrastination today. If we head into a decision with no doubt on our mind, we are far less likely to give it 100% commitment and effort. Sorry, let me repeat that. If we head into a decision with doubt on our mind, we are less likely to give it 100% commitment and effort. Okay, so my apologies. What I'm saying there is that if you enter a new decision with any doubt on your mind whatsoever, you're a lot less likely to give it 100%. Now, what happens if you give it less than 100%? You start to make mistakes. You start to not care about it as much. Maybe the passion starts to drop. Maybe the work ethic begins to drop on it, okay? Because you're not 100% sure if it's the right idea or not. Now, when doubt begins to seep into our minds, it begins to hamper our productivity. It begins to breed negativity, and it makes us think that maybe what we're doing isn't such a good idea. Okay. Now, this again comes back to trusting yourself, making the right decision. Okay. You need to be absolutely certain that what you're doing is the right thing for you. Now, once you have made this key decision, go in it with 100%. Okay. Now, there's an analogy that I love for this type of thing. Okay. If I give you a scenario where I have an empty glass and I have another glass full of water. Okay. If I start to pour the glass of water into the empty glass slowly, it's going to begin flowing, but then it's going to start to drip and spill over the edge, okay? Because the water is not being poured quickly, it's not being given 100% effort, it starts to trickle, it starts to spill, okay? Now, in an alternative scenario, I have another empty glass and I have another glass of water. If I pour the water promptly, I will fill the second glass without spilling a drop, okay? Because I committed to that pour 100%. Now, I love this analogy because it's physically true as well as metaphorically true. Okay. If you're pouring a glass of water into another container, the quicker you pour it, the faster you commit to doing it, the cleaner and neater it's going to be, the less mistakes that you're going to have. Okay. So head into a decision with 100% clarity and 100% commitment. Okay. So that now brings us to the end of topic number 2. I'm going to again, as always, give you a brief moment to take down any notes that you might have and indeed ask any questions. Okay, I've just seen one pop in there for topic number 1. So very much looking forward to answering that, and any more, please do not hesitate in sending them over for us. All right, perfect. So hopefully now you've had a chance to take down any notes, and we're going to dive on to the third and final topic of today's presentation. Okay, so topic number 3, we're going to talk about carefully choosing your advisory sources. Okay, so a key element to strong decision-making is avoiding confusion. Okay, so again, let's use this in a first-person real-world scenario. Okay, are you a strong decision maker or not? Okay, now for those of you that don't feel as if you're a strong decision maker, maybe you have difficulty making decisions, whether it be personal life, whether it be business. Okay, why is that? Are you confused about which choice to make? Are you unsure? Are you uncertain? Okay, now the answer, I would take an educated guess, is yes. Okay. Now, a key element to strong decision making is avoiding confusion. If you are confused, you're a lot less likely to have the ability to make a good decision, make a strong decision. Okay. So the term strong decision making, we're talking about, yes, that's what I want to do, and I know exactly why and I know exactly how. Okay. You will not have that kind of clarity, commitment, or confidence if you are at all confused. Okay, so confusion comes from lots of different angles. It can come from procrastination, it can come from overthinking, it can come from self-doubt, And it can also come from something that we're going to talk about over the next few points. Okay. Now, we may find that multiple sources of information can conflict with each other and our own thoughts. Okay. So lots of ways that you can get information. You can go on Wikipedia, you can go on Google, you can go on YouTube, you can go anywhere you like. Okay. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that information is 100% correct. Okay. So we may find that multiple sources of information can conflict with each other. All right. So what does this mean? Well, it means that you read one thing and it's telling you to do something a certain way. And then the next thing that you read is telling you to do that same thing in a different way. Okay. Now, what's important to note here is that it doesn't mean that one way is right and the other way is wrong necessarily. It just means that some people have different ways of doing something. Okay. So let's say that you're baking a cake. One article might tell you to put the flour and eggs and all the rest of the cake ingredients. My apologies, I'm not a baker. But it might tell you to put all the ingredients in and then bake it at 200 degrees for 30 minutes. Now, maybe another recipe says bake it at 180 degrees for 45 minutes. Okay. It's the same outcome, or a very similar outcome at least, but it's not the same theory. Okay. Now, what's going to happen here is that now you're not going to know which is the best way to bake the cake. All right. So you might find that multiple sources of information, whilst not necessarily incorrect, can begin to conflict with each other. Okay. Now, in a more serious circumstance, you might find that one way is in fact incorrect and the other way is correct. Okay. Now, this applies pretty heavily to paid advertising and SEO and website development. Okay. Now, almost everybody will have their own theory of, well, this is the best way to do it, and this is the best way to do research, and this is the most efficient. I can give you lots and lots and lots of examples in that space. Okay. But for the sake of your time, I will keep it brief and to the point. Okay. Multiple sources of information can conflict with each other. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. It just means that they have different theories. Now, what you need to do is look for the most educated, experienced, and proven sources of guidance for information on your decisions. Okay. So look at credibility, look at sources, and ultimately start to align with whatever you like the most. Okay. As long as it's accurate, make sure that you're choosing a very few specific sources of information in that particular niche. Okay. So let's say that you wanted to grow a business. Don't hire 5 coaches, hire 1 coach. Don't read 5 articles, read 1 article. Okay. If you want to get into paid advertising, don't read 5 different theories, read 2 different theories that are recommended to be the best, and then pick whichever one you like most. Okay. Make sure that you're picking your sources based on credibility, based on experience, based on success, proven results, all these different things that you can look at. But what I would advise, if you're trying to do something, don't read 10 plus different ways in which to do it. Pick the best source and go with that. Okay. So if you're reading a book on business, on marketing, on finance, make sure that you pick one of the most highly recommended books. Make sure that it's a personal recommendation from a friend or a trusted colleague. Any number of ways in which you can take a proven, credible resource. Okay. And if you read it or you learn from it and you like it, then continually learn from this source. Okay. So look for the most educated, experienced, and proven sources of guidance for information on your decisions. Okay. Now, the final point here, or perhaps the most important, is that ultimately you must make your own decisions based on the information that you have gathered. Okay. So imagine yourself as a gatherer. You're taking information from different sources. Sometimes you're taking information from one sole source that you have committed to. Okay. You must then make your own decision. And now what's important to remember here is that you are the key decision maker. Only you can decide ultimately what you do. Okay. Now, whether that's financial, whether it's operational, whether it's a physical goal, whether it's an emotional goal, doesn't matter. Okay. Ultimately, you're the one making the decision. You're the one in charge. You're the one in control. So take this responsibility on yourself. Understand that it is only you that can make the correct decision for yourself. Okay. Now, in this circumstance, to put it nicely, there is no right and there is no wrong. Okay. The only thing that may be wrong is if any information is inaccurate or misleading. Okay. Other than that, there isn't really a right or wrong way to do this. You have to make the decision. You have to make sure that you're going to the best of your knowledge and the best of your ability to the right resources. Okay. So ultimately, you must make your own decisions. All right. So to recap on today's presentation, topic number 1, risks are less risky when thorough analysis is completed. Okay. So you'll see a little bit of wordplay here. Now, something being risky is generally termed as a negative phrase. Okay. Now, it's not always negative. It's not always bad. All right. But risks are less risky when thorough analysis is completed. Okay. Number two, when you make a decision, give it 100%. If it's a sensible decision, you've done your research, you've done your background checks, everything you need to do, give it 100% and go at it, all guns blazing. And finally, choose your advice carefully. Okay. Do your research, look at the credibility, make sure that whoever you're deciding to work with, whoever you're deciding to learn from, or whatever you're deciding to learn from is credible with proven success and results. Okay. So one of my favorite pieces now, we're jumping onto the Q&A section, and a very, very big thank you for attending. Okay. So if you would like to, you're more than welcome to talk to a member of our team. Okay. If you would like to do that, you can head over to iob-business.com/talk-to-us, and you can book a call at a time that suits you. Okay. So you're more than welcome to go ahead and do that. I'm going to leave that information up on screen for you just now, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the questions that I have from today's session. Okay. So question number one, I have a few different resources for learning. Is this okay? Yeah, absolutely. So there's nothing wrong with learning from multiple sources, okay? But you must learn to pick out the bits of information that apply to you and that you can understand well, okay? So in simple theory, there's nothing wrong with learning from multiple resources as long as they're credible, as long as you trust them. What you must learn to do is pick and highlight the pieces that apply most to you and your business, because you might read a book and only 10% of that book is relevant to you. Okay. So take out the 10% that you like the most and that applies most to you and you find the most valuable, and piece that together with the other 10% from all the other books that you've enjoyed. If you like to read books meticulously, then that is what you should do. All right. So fantastic question. Thank you very much indeed for asking. Okay, second question here. I love it. And it's quite a broad question. So what I would like to do is try and specify a little bit for you. Okay, so the question is, how long should I take to make a decision? Okay, now, of course, this applies in multiple different formats. So to simplify it, I would say that there's no specific timeline attached to this. Okay, however, you must be aware of how long you're sitting, on the fence, sitting on a decision. Because if you take too long, as we've discussed, now there is no specific timeline for being too long. Okay, you take as much time as you need, but make sure that you're not taking unnecessarily large amounts of time. Okay, now you can begin to raise doubts within yourself that didn't exist. You can begin to overthink. You can begin to procrastinate. So if you feel like, oh, well, this is the decision that I should have made a few weeks ago, then don't hang about, don't delay. And if you feel like it's a decision that you could make fairly quickly, let's just say within a week, then don't procrastinate, don't delay. And the only person getting in the way of you making this decision would be yourself. All right. So again, another fantastic question. Thank you so much for those questions today. So I'm just going to go ahead and check if we have any more questions up for today. And I don't think that we do. All right. Perfect. So as always, it's been a real pleasure presenting with you today. I wish you the very best for the rest of your Wednesday. I look forward to seeing you again a couple of weeks from now. Take care and speak soon.